President Trump is saying Iran did not capture CIA spies. Earlier today, Tehran said it broke up a U.S. spy ring. It claimed 17 Iranian nationals were arrested, and some of them were sentenced to death. President Trump called the claims a lie, but says the U.S. is ready for the worst.
I read a report today about CIA. That's totally a false story. That's another lie. They put out propaganda. They put out lies. Let's see what happens with Iran. We are ready for the absolute worst, and we're ready for sense, too. But we are very geared up. They put their finger up in the air, and they disrespected the United States. They shouldn't have done that. That was a big mistake. One of the best things I've done is terminate that ridiculous deal. If they want to make a deal, frankly, it's getting harder for me to want to make a deal with Iran because they behave very badly. They're saying bad things, and I'll tell you, it could go either way.
CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab is following the latest from Fujairah in the United Arab Emirates. All right, thank you so much for being with us. Now, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also pointed to Iran's history of lying. But has the regime put forth any evidence to back up this claim that it broke up the spy ring?
Yeah, hey, Paula, you're absolutely right. I mean, we've heard just now from the president accusing Iran of lying. We earlier heard from the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, saying exactly the same thing. And here's the thing with Iran, especially when it comes to these allegations that they put out, that they've broken up spy rings, that they've sort of found a way to infiltrate people who may be sort of carrying out nefarious activities against the Islamic Republic of Iran. When you pay close attention to Iran, as I often do, and pay close attention to the Iranian media, this idea that they are being spied on, this idea that there are spy rings operating right across the country sort of permeates their news bulletins, conversations you'll hear from people on social media and the like of that. But when it comes to your central question about evidence, is this true? The short answer is we just don't know. Now, what makes this specific allegation, this specific announcement, if you will, of 17 suspects taken into custody, some sentenced to a death sentence, what makes this one different is that in parallel to that announcement, Iran also released what they're calling a documentary, which is this frankly strange video they put out where they included documents, where they included what they said were phone records, what they included were social media pictures of the handlers of these suspected Iranian collaborators with the U.S. That in itself is different, but the arrest of people accused of spying for the U.S. or indeed Israel isn't new. In fact, in June, 219 people in Iran were arrested on those very same allegations. And in March, we know a number of people were executed, again, accused of spying for the U.S.
And the backdrop of all of this, of course, includes Iran's seizure of 2 British tankers. Last week, President Trump said he'd be talking to the U.K. about this. So where does that situation stand right now?
Yeah, a very tense situation, particularly for the British government. As you rightly say, President Trump, as soon as that ship was intercepted by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and taken into Iranian custody, said that he'd be in close touch with the UK government. We know that the UK government held an emergency session just a few hours ago where they made this big announcement that they are forming a pan-European force here in the Gulf region, in the Strait of Hormuz, to protect their commercial shipping interests as they sail through, to prevent anything like this happening again. But there is an important caveat here. Jeremy Hunt, who is Britain's foreign secretary, said that he would not be joining and that the UK and other European countries would not likely be joining a similar U.S. proposal to have their own force. The reason, they say, is that they don't agree with President Trump's inverted commas, air quotes, maximum pressure campaign against Iran. They want to keep that 2015 Obama-era nuclear deal that President Trump pulled out of last year. But in saying that, they still need to protect their ships in the region, their commercial interests in the region, but really just underscores just how divergent the U.S. government and the U.K. government are when it comes to Iran.
Earlier, we heard the president say Iran's actions are making it, quote, harder for him to make a deal. So bottom line here, these tensions between the U.S. and the Iran, will they push the two sides further apart when it comes to any sort of nuclear agreement?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, we just heard from the president, him saying, you know, I'm further away from wanting to make a deal, but very much leaving the door open. It's pretty clear that President Trump wants to find a way to the negotiating table with the Iranian government. His whole sort of strategy when it comes to countries that have for decades been seen as enemies of the U.S., whether it's North Korea and indeed Iran, has been to flip the script and to try to figure out a way to meet face-to-face with these leaders. But it doesn't seem like the Iranian leadership wants to do that. At one point, Hassan Rouhani, who's the Iranian president, who was obviously very involved with the Obama administration and that nuclear agreement that they reached in 2015, indicated he might be willing to meet President Trump. But we have to remember, Iran is a theocracy. The supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, said, absolutely not. There is no way that Iran will go back to the negotiating table with the U.S. after they spent years trying to craft this agreement which President Trump pulled out of. But again, as we've been hearing, President Trump saying he will go to the table. But when we see these tensions, when we see these spiraling or escalating tensions here in the Gulf and these tankers either being targeted and in this case being forced into Iranian waters and in their custody, it's making it incredibly difficult for either sides to ever find themselves at a negotiating table.
Imtiaz, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.